Hey guys, I know I've been talking a long time now about announcing something, and well, I'm glad to let you know that I wasn't bullshitting and the day has finally arrived, and I get to unveil what I will be doing going forward. My first guest is Colin Johanson, which I'm sure a lot of you will recognize from his days as the creative director at ArenaNet, and now he's currently at Amazon Game Studios working on a new project called Crucible. Our conversation ranges from his background and how he got into gaming, different aspects of the development process, the future of MMO gaming, and much more. I just ask that you bear with my incredibly spectacular and terrible editing skills. And just note that for me, content is the most important thing. But that being said, going forward, this editing along with becoming a better interviewer are the things that I strive to improve drastically on as time goes on. The most important thing for me with this first episode was just getting the damn interview in the first place. So I hope you all enjoy my conversation with Colin Johanson. All right, Colin, I thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. How is your day going?
Oh, it's great.
It's
Thanks.
great. It's great.
It's
That's
it's over 70 degrees in Seattle today, which is the
oh,
first time all year that is true, which means it is mandatory shorts in Seattle day. If it cracks 70, it's just what you do.
it's hot over there, man. So yeah, I think I don't know, probably in the 90s over here right now or 80s. So
Oh,
it's it's not fun weather. But a lot of people may know you from your ArenaNet days, but a lot of people don't know that you actually worked on an FPS in the past. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
yeah. I'll kind of. I guess I'll start at the beginning. I have I think I like to, I guess, pretty fun story for getting into game development. I got very, very lucky, and I've had a lot of good friends over the years who've helped me out get into some really cool situations that I don't know if I deserved or necessarily would uh, you know would have had the opportunity if not for all of them. So you know, people always say it's who you know, not what you know, and man,
Right,
it's certainly
right.
in a lot of ways it's been true for me. Yeah, I actually when this is a long-winded story to get to the answer of your
Oh,
question, but
that's fine. That's fine.
when when I was in high school, I ended up falling in love with the original MMOs, text-based online
Okay.
gaming,
Okay.
MUDs, mushes, and I played them on AOL back in the day. I think probably half of your audience won't be old
Yeah.
enough to know what it is, but yeah, the first online text-based game stuff. And I found this game, Dragon's Gate. I really liked playing it. I ended up trying to send the guys who made it a whole bunch of ideas and suggestions for the game, and they offered me a job to work for them as a customer service guy, and eventually, within a couple months, to grow into being a game designer on the game. And I was 16 at the time. I was in high school,
Okay.
and
Wow.
I just jumped all over it. Oh my god,
Yeah.
I get to be a game designer. And it was this tiny little company called Interworld Productions that basically made small little games for AOL. They had stuff like Mage Storm and Dragon's Gate at the time. And so I worked for them through high school. And when it was time for me to go to college, they gave me the choice of I could fly out to Virginia, I could work with them, or I could go to college. And someday when I graduated, if I was interested, I could come work in house for them instead. Um,
Okay.
and I decided I wanted to go to college. I was really interested at the time in becoming a programmer, and I had taken programming classes in high school, and so I figured, I need to get a full degree in programming before I can actually go be a real programmer.
Right.
Um, and so right around that same time, the company changed from Interworld Productions and became Mythic Entertainment, and they started building this game called Dark Age of Camelot. And I got very lucky and got to be one of the original, I think, 12 sort of day-to-day testers on Dark Age of Camelot while they were building it, and got to play the game from the very earliest stages and give them feedback on it. And through college, most of the way through college, I kept working and running their older games for them as a lead designer on Dragon's Gate and helping with some of their older products. I took a summer off and I did an internship at Zipper Interactive, the company that makes the SOCOM series,
Oh wow.
and I got to be a programming intern on the first SOCOM game. And some of the fun stuff I got to mess around with is I got to actually help build the technology and test it for the first voice recognition headset for Sony, which was super cool. I get to meet some great people that later on I worked with much later in life. Daniel Dochu, who was the art director at ArenaNet forever. Dave Beetlestone, who is the environment lead at ArenaNet. I got to work with them really early in their careers.
Okay.
Phil, a couple other guys who were all there, who ended up all coming over to ArenaNet later on. And my internship was great, but it also taught me that there is no way in the world I should be a programmer. And by the end of it, I turned my resolve around to go focus my career on being a game designer and learning also more about the business side of game operations, because I felt that was an area people didn't really know a lot about. The next year, I actually took a year off from Mythic, and I worked for Games Workshop as an outrider. I got to travel around Eastern Washington, Western Idaho, and Montana, and work with game stores. And I ran tournaments for them. I got to do the Warhammer Grand Tournament in Seattle, which was awesome. And I built terrain tables and basically convinced people that Warhammer was great. And that was purely a job out of love. I was a huge Warhammer fan and just did that for fun. And ultimately, went back, kept working for Mythic from home while I was in college. I graduated. I took the job with them and flew out to Virginia. I worked there on a game called Imperator, or Imperator, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Another space MMO, which was also actually a shooter. And I spent about a year on that before a buddy of mine, Lewis Moore, who was a good buddy from growing up in high school. We were in the same gaming group. We'd play Warhammer and Magic together all the time. He was the lead server programmer at ArenaNet, and he called me up and said, "Hey, we need one game designer. Our game ships in 6 weeks. You've been telling me for a while that you want to come back to Seattle. What do you think? Are you interested?" And I knew almost nothing about Guild Wars at the time. So I said, sure, I'll at least check it out. I spent the night doing a bunch of research. The next day, I had a call with Jeff Strain, who is one of the 3 founders of ArenaNet. Basically, he described the whole opportunity to me. He said, it's a game designer. We need someone to help us finish this game. I flew out to Seattle that Friday. I interviewed, and the deal was if I wanted the job, I had to be back in Seattle Monday morning in 3 days to take the job. So I flew back to Virginia. I took everything I owned. I threw it in my Subaru and hired a moving truck to move the Subaru with all of my stuff in it across the country. I went to the airport with a duffel bag full of clothes. I flew to Vegas for a day to celebrate getting a new job, and then I flew to I flew to Seattle.
That's the right way to do it, huh?
Absolutely. I flew to Seattle. I started on Monday. I lived in an apartment for 6 weeks with no furnishings except for my sleeping bag and my clothes. I got to spend 6 weeks building just about every quest actually that shipped with the original Guild Wars Prophecies. When I showed up, there were almost no quests in the game. And Eric and Ben came to my desk, and Eric had written about 300 quests. Ben took a day teaching me how to build them. They plopped them on my desk and said, in 6 weeks, this game ships. The number of quests that you put in the game is the number of quests this game ships with.
Wow.
Yeah, I just started at number 1 and cranked through and built as many of them as I could in 6 weeks, and we shipped the game. And that was how I ended up there. And 12 years later, after many years of MMO development, about a year ago, I decided a lot of different things going on in my life, and decided to make the jump over to Amazon to work with a bunch of old ArenaNet friends on a shooter. It's something I really wanted to do, something different, get into a different genre again. My wife actually opened her own business right next to our house over in Seattle, and my commute was like an hour and a half every day going over to Bellevue and back at ArenaNet. We had a 2-year-old at the time and another kid on the way, and so I really wanted to be home a lot more and be there for the family, and help out with my wife's business too. She spent many years supporting me as I traveled all over the world and worked very long hours, and I thought it was my turn to give that support back to her. So,
Yep.
So that all of that kind of came together in the perfect timing that Amazon offered me a chance to come work over here. I really wasn't looking or planning on leaving, and everything was kind of perfect timing wise. And so now I'm doing shooters again. So
So now you're going from MMOs to shooters, and shooters, they've there's been a lot of shooters over the years. That's definitely a genre that's been pretty fleshed out. How would you think that what in what ways do you think that genre can be furthered upon that we haven't seen yet? Like in
Um,
general.
it's interesting. We haven't really said a whole lot about Crucible at this point. Basically, there's like a one paragraph description and a piece of art floating out
Right,
there.
right.
But I think the path that we've chosen is we feel that the last player standing shooter genre is a space that has a lot of opportunity in it.
Okay.
That it's a newer genre. Predominantly, it's all based in mods that have been done in the past.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so there's a lot of room to play and to tackle and try stuff different. And so I think for me, that's the thing I'm most excited about is that side of it.
Yeah.
I think also hero shooters is another space that there's Overwatch and there are MOBAs, but I wouldn't call those
Yeah,
shooters.
there's not really like I would honestly think that Overwatch is the only like one of the few true hero shooters. I mean, I know there's a few others out there right now. I think like Paladins or is that what it is? I don't know.
Yeah, there's
I know
like
the people that
Paladins
made
and
Smite.
more,
The people that made Smite,
and,
they have one and so
and
yeah, that's
even
definitely something that can be that genre definitely has there's a lot that can be done there that we haven't seen yet. I don't there hasn't been a lot done. I think the new what's it called? Is it the new Quake? I think they're trying to tack
yeah.
on hero shooting with that one. I don't know how that's going to work out.
I'm actually really excited for that. I think of all the stuff that I've heard announced anytime soon, that's the one I'm most
Oh
curious to
yeah.
check out. I think even like Paladins or Smite or Battleborn, they're all kind of more inherently
More
MOBAs than they are
MOBA.
shooters.
Yep. Right.
And so I think that's the part that's most interesting is going more down that shooter space. Like if I look at really successful shooters, some of the stuff I'm most excited about on PC is like TF2. I mean, it's
Yep.
old.
Yep.
CS:GO is really old if you look at the
Oh
roots by
yeah.
which it
Oh
started.
yeah.
There's a lot of room to play in there that I think that if you look at in Asia, the biggest shooter is Crossfire, and it's ancient and it's been around forever.
Yep. Yep.
So it's a genre that is super popular, but I think also has a lot of room for innovation. I think that's something that we're definitely my time at ArenaNet and even at Mythic as well really taught me is attempting to innovate and try new things and taking risks, even if they totally blow up in your face and don't work, are infinitely better for you as a developer and for your company and for the state of the game industry than it is playing it safe and
Yes.
trying the same stuff. And I think if you're willing to do that, even if you're going to do things horribly wrong, and you'll learn that lesson, and hopefully you can apply that to future things you do. But if you're willing to take those risks, that's how the game industry moves forward. And that's the thing I'm
Right.
most excited about is always finding teams that are willing to do that and kind of push the envelope and try crazy stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so man, you're a machine. You blew through some of my questions. I had it. I was gonna ask you about your time with SOCOM, but then I was gonna be like, let's go back further. You were at Mythic. Well, I guess I thought you were at Mythic before it was Mythic, but you were on a team that got picked up by Mythic. Is how it worked out, or is that correct? Or
No, so it actually it started as Interworld Productions.
okay,
Interworld Productions was like Mark Jacobs and Darren Hyrup,
okay,
Lori Silva at the time, now Lori Hyrup, a few other folks, and then a very large group of contract and/or volunteer folks who all worked from home to support this company, and that group who founded Interworld Productions turned it into Mythic Entertainment. So it was actually like Mythic
okay,
was run by the exact same people,
yeah,
and they just kind of leveled up and grew into Mythic.
right. And so getting to work on your the mud and Dragon's Gate back in those days, what interesting elements would you say might have existed back then that aren't quite that don't quite exist in today's industry?
Huh. Man, I gotta be honest, I haven't thought about
Mm.
that game and building stuff back then in a long time. It's it's been I guess it's 20 years ago when I first started working on Dragon's Gate.
Right, right.
And yeah, so I think some of the stuff that was most like a lot of my all-time favorite video game memories are actually all on that game.
Okay.
And that's crazy to think, but I think a big part of that is I think the text-based format allowed for you to create whatever vision you wanted.
Yeah,
And as a player, you could craft a story and craft a world around you that was never limited by the graphics or what the game systems allowed you to do. You
right.
could you could override an emote and type like slash bow and then type a bunch of crap after it, and that would spill out in game, and it would be like Colin bows and also throws the sword of truth in the air and jump kicks it into a basketball hoop. And I'm like, it meant you could totally ruin immersion for everybody else, but it also
But
meant that you found a great group of people to play with. You could have these incredible, awesome game experiences that all of you
right.
together created. Um, the ability as a game developer too, I think one of the things that our team prided itself on, and I'd like to think many years later, some of this came out in the concepts for like the public quest system for Warhammer. And we had actually a really robust dynamic event or dynamic content system we were planning for Imperator that never came to light, and even the event system for Guild Wars 2.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I think I was reading something about that, and I was thinking, that's another thing. A lot of people might, when they hear dynamic events, they might think Guild Wars 2. Some might think Rift. Some might go back to Warhammer, and for some people, they might even think go as far back as to like Tabula Rasa. But y'all actually were working on some of that stuff even further back than that.
Yeah, we were. I think so. We were building something that was really robust for Imperator that I think not that is more in line with kind of what like procedural content systems are doing today.
Okay.
Um, but if you look at the old school text-based games, you had the ability to, if you were a game designer on the fly live as people were playing in the world, you could just show up in a room that they were in
Yeah.
and you could do anything. You could fill the room with creatures, you could change the rules live, and the populations were small enough that you could create these amazing moments that people would remember for years on end. You could tell storylines that would play out over months, and on the forums, everyone would post and say, "This happened tonight. Oh, I saw this happen. Whoa, that I saw this orc roaming through this
Yeah.
map. What does everybody think it means?" And like the roots of that, of like having an ever changing, ever living world. I think the most pure version of that that's ever been done is actually still in text based games,
Yeah.
and I think the graphic gaming experience every year is getting closer to what that freeform experience was. Like, I'm super bummed that EQ Next never materialized
I know.
because I think the concept for that was
Yeah.
like the closest thing to the purity of what that text-based game was brought forward into the future. It was in a lot of ways the ultimate sandbox, but also could have a story within it.
Yep. Yep. That's
Um,
I was
I,
definitely really sad to hear that one wasn't gonna come out. Even if it didn't live up to what it was gonna be, I still wanted to see at least where they were going with it. I mean, I think even getting it out would have also been an example for other people to come and piggyback off of and maybe get what they were trying to go for right in the future. But
there's There's something that got announced, I want to say like a month ago, maybe, that feels like it actually draws a lot of inspiration from the EQ Next
is it?
concepts.
Are you thinking of Ashes of Creation? Is that
Yeah,
it?
that's it. I actually thought that was also like I watched their announce video. I think they're in Kickstarter just like as of last week.
Yep. Yep.
I hope they find a way to make that work. Like man, that video is just like 1,000 game systems in one game.
I know.
I wish them the best of luck because after making MMOs, man, I have so much respect for how hard it is to make those. Like every other genre of game is so easy compared to making MMOs. It's not easy to do them right. Like it's making a great game is really fucking hard.
Right. Right.
But to actually like just to even physically create the game, an MMO is so much harder. I don't envy them looking at all the list of stuff they're trying to do. But man, if they can pull it off, that's gonna be
That'd be
so cool.
Yeah, that'd be really awesome. And so going back to what you said about the text-based games and being able to get that true immersion element that you don't think has been has been done yet in MMOs or any of our modern graphical games. Along those lines, do you think that the answer to going bigger and getting better is to actually take some steps backwards and maybe go smaller and then we can innovate smaller and then use that to scale that to a grander scale rather than always just trying to make the biggest grandest world and not necessarily pulling off any of the things that we really want to pull off.
Yeah, I honestly I think that's fantastic. That's a great question, and I think you're starting to see a little bit of that. Like I think if you look at maybe some of the most successful games to do that, I think that's what in the last decade. Like I would look at Eve as
Yeah.
probably
Oh
the
yeah.
the most successful sandbox player created, players make the storylines concept, and that is not by a game system standpoint. That is not an incredibly complicated game. It's insanely
No.
complicated to learn. Like I mean, the learning curve on it. I've seen the little picture where learning curve looks like this, and then there's like a person hanging off the cliff. Like it's crazy complex, but the game systems behind it, they chose a very specific subset of things to focus on, and they said just put the rest in the player's hands. I think No Man's Sky attempted to do something along those lines, and somewhere along the line, it became. I think it is a demo of technology by which you could create procedural worlds and travel all over the place. But I don't think
Right.
there was really a game in it. It was more of just a technology demo. And if it was phrased as that, I actually think it would have been done just fine. It was that people perceived there to be or promised to be. I don't know. I don't know enough about that. But the concept behind that, I think, is an attempt to do that as well. It just wasn't as successful as it could be. I think if you look at a lot of the trappings that MMOs have fallen into for the last 10 years, everybody wants to be World of Warcraft, and they look at World of Warcraft and say the way you do that is you put everything in the kitchen sink in this game.
Yep.
And I think if you can find purity and say this is the area we're going to innovate and we're going to do stuff only in this part and really do that really really well, and then just give the tools to the players
Yeah.
to create everything else, and then we will support them over time. And wherever the players want to take the game, we will come behind that. We'll talk to them. We'll listen to them. We'll give them the tools that they're asking for and help them create this world together. Starting with one really clear, simple innovation. I think that is the only way that the MMO industry really thrives and grows going forward. I think people just aren't going to fund 200 million, $400 million
No.
MMOs anymore. And when they're not, it means you need a small team, and a small team cannot build WoW. They can't build Guild Wars. A small team needs to build something really clear and contained, and do that really well, and then let it grow from there.
Well, that's the thing. I think that the market, the genre itself is only going to go forward until they once they change the method in which they get to market, how they get to market, how much. Because right now, like it's like the type of development systems we see is secure a big pile of money, go into hiding, don't let anyone see what we're doing, and then
Yep.
finally, by the time we bring testers in, they're like, "This game sucks. What are you doing? This game is terrible." And at that point, a lot of the core features are stuck,
Yep.
and so I think that the way, like, we have to find a different path towards for that development process, and it may not be developing the whole pie all at once. Like, you may not get to make your whole vision at once. You may have to, like you said, focus on one innovative area, and then go more of a slow growth path. and
Yep.
and
Yeah,
I,
and
and I
it means it probably you're saying you're putting yourself more towards a niche audience,
right,
but
right.
if your development costs are low enough, that is totally fine, and you could be successful with that. Like
if
I
if
think,
you create a lean team, and you target more of a niche, and you're make your cash flow positive instead of trying to secure a huge pile of money, and you don't know what it's going to turn into, or how the community is going to receive it. I think if you fail with the other one, there's not really as much, I guess, negativity to that. It's There's not as much loss there.
and I think you're already starting to see a shift towards that. If you look at the number of MMOs that are in development right now, the vast majority are Kickstartered or smaller
Yep.
dev studios that are more focused on one specific. Like a lot of them are just doing like the world versus world or large scale PvP combat, and that's their whole game, and they're focusing just on that, and they're not building huge PvE storylines and
Right.
quests and all this other stuff. And I think that's really smart. Like I think from a standpoint of how do you build a sustainable development model in a company that can grow and get an audience. It's that or spend 5 or 6 years making a game like we did with Guild Wars 2. Like in retrospect, if I could go back and change anything about the way that we built that game, I probably would have cut like half the stuff from it and
Yeah.
really just focus down on what is the things that made up the core of that game, and really done those things amazingly well, and spent our time entirely on that. Like, I think the event system is cool and has a lot of neat things to it, and is a really powerful tool. I don't think it lives up to the promise of what a truly living world can be. It was a
Right.
stepping stone towards getting
It's a
there, and
stepping stone. Yep.
it would have been super fun to spend more time trying to take that to a further place where it is more procedural, more gives the players tools to create and empower one another to change the world. Um, I'm really happy with what we built. Like, I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of in my career, was getting to be a part of that. But it's
Yeah.
funny in retrospect, you look back and there's so many things that you could do differently.
Yep, hindsight 2020 right there. And that does lead into a question I had. And so looking at Guild Wars 2, you had the Guild Wars 2 manifesto video, and that created a lot of hype for people. I definitely think that video really impacted me. As soon as I saw that video, I was like, I'm sold, take my money, let's go. And so looking back now, what do you think that y'all delivered on in that mission and that vision, and what do you think that y'all missed the mark on?
To be honest, like, I think, out of respect for all the people I love still working on the game, I think it's not fair for me to try to answer that. I
Right.
don't work at ArenaNet anymore. I think that would be a phenomenal question for some of the folks who are still there, who've been there from the beginning,
Yeah.
to get their take on it. But yeah, I mean, I have my own opinions. At the end of the day, I think that. Um, it is important for the people who are working on the game every day to answer that question, and not somebody who is not
Right.
working on it anymore.
That's fair. That's fair.
I, I will share a fun story about how that video came to be that I don't know if it ever has been told. So, uh, a, a couple of us ended up being a part of that video who were originally never planned to be. The manifesto video, originally the idea was, the Mike O'Brien, was one of our three founders at the time, was
Yeah.
going to do a little bit more of the video, and then Eric Flanham, who was the lead designer for Guild Wars 2 at the time, was going to do a big chunk of it. And Eric ended up being out sick the day that they were recording the video, and Mike ended up, I think something happened where he had to leave work early that day, and so he only got to shoot about half what he was scheduled to shoot. And
Yeah.
so they ended up just going around the office and trying to find people to jump in and do the video. And so they grabbed me, they grabbed John Peters, they put us on video, and said, "Hey guys, we need you to talk about these things." And we found out that day that John is absolutely terrified of looking at a camera.
Oh
And so he's completely cut from the manifesto video because he basically just stared at the camera for half an hour and didn't say very much. But he's phenomenal if there's a camera pointed at him and he's talking to anybody else. Like
Lord.
John,
But
as
staring at the camera,
direct.
I feel his pain, because even sitting in a room, like, whereas I could talk clearly, just if it's just me talking to someone, or maybe if there was someone recording me. But when I look into the camera, it's like everything I was gonna say is now gone. It is gone. I don't have any recollection, so I definitely feel his pain there.
Yeah, he definitely had that moment, and I got lucky and just randomly spouted stuff into the camera. I didn't like we had no prep. They just said, "Hey, tell us what you think Guild Wars is going to be." And at the time, we didn't like the game was barely playable, and so mostly what we had is just a whole bunch of docs that said, "This is what we want it to be. This is our vision for
Okay.
what the game would be." So they just go in a room and say the stuff that you think that it's going to be when it's done. And
Okay.
so that's what we did. And the manifesto video was born out of that as this is what we hope. This is our dreams of what we hope the game can be.
Right.
Not this is today what the game actually is. And so things like I swung a sword was me trying to imagine what the hell the combat system would be like when currently we couldn't actually play combat in the game other than like a few rough moves. So there you go. At the time, I had no plans to do that stuff, and Eric, as he is prone to do, found a way to sneak me in and put me in front of the camera so he didn't have to. So yeah, that was great, and that haunted me for the rest of my life to this day.
So you said you got your start with the Mud Dragons Gate, and that, like, playing that game, you sent a lot of suggestions to them. Is that where your gaming and game development the interest sparked, or was there anything before that that really made you be like, this is something I would really love to do?
Yeah, I got my first Nintendo when I was 5 years old. It was a gift from my parents the year the Nintendo came out in the U.S. So that'll date me pretty clearly. And I grew up on old school Nintendo games, and then my Super Nintendo, and then my N64, and then in around high school, I fell in love with PC gaming and started getting into a lot more PC games. I think the Quest for Glory series is probably my all-time old school Sierra RPG game series that got me to fall in love with RPGs. And that I think a combination of that and Dragon's Gate were the things that really made me realize like this can be a career. This is something that people do. I had always hoped there would be a way I could be involved in it, but I really didn't know how. I didn't have a path. I had no clue how to get there. And honestly, it was really just dumb luck in high school that this company even reached out to me to do that. Like, if they hadn't, I don't know if I would ever have gotten into the game industry at all. It was more just like I just really loved their game and just wanted to send them some ideas, and I really liked playing it. And it ended up turning into that as a
Wow.
career.
So
I
it's
remember
more
my
about the opportunity being presented to you with something that you love, rather than I am going to be a game developer.
Yeah, I will say when I went to college, and I was 18 years old and went to college, and everyone asked, "What do you want to do?" And everyone shows up at college, and like 50% of people are like, "I don't have a clue. I'm just to find out."
Mhm.
I walked in the door and like I'm going to be a video game designer and I'm going to be a video game programmer, and I was going back and forth between the two, and everyone thought I was crazy because there was no classes for it, there was no education for it. I was in business school, and they're like, "Why are you doing business school to do
Why are you
that?" And like,
doing this?
we'll figure it out someday. Don't worry about it.
What does this have to do with gaming at all?
I remember when I was like I think about 17 years old, I got the lead designer position on Dragon's Gate, and I was running a team of game designers and customer service folks who all supported the game. And I would stay up way into the night. I'd stay up till 1, 2, 3 in the morning to run events and to run scenarios and to put content into the game and to manage my team. And my parents would come into my room and they're like, "Colin, what the hell are you doing? It's 2 in the morning and you have school tomorrow." And like, "I'm working. I'm building my resume right now." And they did not understand or believe me all the way until I graduated college and got a real job doing it full time.
Okay, now we
At that moment, my dad told this story at my wedding. He's like, that was the moment where like, okay, all those years that he told us he was staying up playing video games all night as a job, it actually was real, but we were so mad at him for so many years. And oh, it was good. I used to ditch school to just work all day so I could keep making stuff for the game. Yeah.
Dang, that's awesome. It's really awesome. And so, looking when I look at a lot of the games that are out today, I feel like they're even like in the RPG genre, MMO genre. I feel like a lot of them are missing that magic. I don't know what a better word is for it other than that magic, which could be the immersive quality, the ability to be sucked in like you were with some of the older games. And I think sometimes we can confuse the word immersion with graphical like fidelity or graphical quality, rather than a game just pulling off whatever elements it was going for so much that it really draws you into the gameplay. And so I'm curious, what games would you say had that element for you through the years? What games stood out the most in those departments?
It's tough to weigh between nostalgia and actual like quality of game because there's so
Yeah.
many games you go back and play now, and it's like a
Oh my
lot of the games
gosh.
I put on my list. I think if I played them now, I would not be totally sucked into them and find them to be the greatest game ever. But at the time where I was at in life, based on what other games I'd seen and everything, it really changes that.
Yeah.
We got this all the time with Guild Wars 1. Like you still see today, where it's like Guild Wars 1 is the greatest game ever made, and there was nothing wrong with it. The whole
Yeah.
time we were making Guild Wars 1 and putting out expansions for it, we had forums filled with people bitching about all the stuff they didn't like about it, how we needed to fix everything. And then the second Guild Wars 2 came out. Guild Wars 1 was the greatest thing ever made. And I'm sure if they ever make more Guild Wars stuff, it'll be whatever the previous one was.
Yeah.
SOCOM was the same thing. The original SOCOM was the best, and no SOCOM can live up to it. And so we always, I think it's hard to not conflate things when you look back with rose-colored glasses. So I can say the stuff that made me fall in love with gaming was like Mario Kart, Quest for Glory, The original Final Fantasies
Okay. Yeah.
all totally hooked me. I spent, man, Final Fantasy one, like it was. I don't want to say it was this amazing game. Like the other later Final Fantasies were actually much better, but for me, it was the game that just completely hooked me on that concept of being in an RPG world. Zelda was another. The first couple Zelda games, those were awesome. Man, uh, boy, there's so many different things over the years. Once
Yeah.
you start into MMOs, I've noticed that like your time cycle of games goes from like over a couple year period, like, oh, I love these 10 games, to you get into an MMO and I was like, I loved this one game for these 3 years because it was all I played. So like
Yeah. Yeah.
Dark
Yeah.
Age of Camelot, I adore. I Warhammer Online, I played a ton of, and I really loved.
Yeah. I played that as well. Yeah.
Dragon's Gate, I played way too much of. So all of those, like, I honestly like, there's just so many games. I can't think of everything anymore right now. GoldenEye, that was one that made me fall in love with shooters. Halo, the first couple Halo games. I remember in college we drilled a hole through the floor from my apartment to the guy who lived under us, so we could hook up our two Xboxes. And on Friday nights we'd have people over and we just drink beer all night and hang out. We play Halo on our TVs and have little impromptu tournaments and stuff.
That's
Like
awesome. Yeah.
each of those for different reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I think there's definitely some truth there, but then there's also it's just it's hard to distinguish what's the truth and what's the rose-colored glasses. And then there's another element thrown in that I think that these days we're, as far as UI goes and just quality of life features in games, we're spoiled with those. Those are developed great, and it makes it to where even if an older game might have delivered a better experience, you can't even put yourself through that anymore because of all the quality of life features are terrible, like the UI or whatever, all the painful stuff you got to go through to get back into an older game. And so yeah, it's definitely a hard thing to distinguish.
I think it's also getting really hard to stand out from the pack. If you look at the number of games released per year, even 10 years ago versus today, uh, the number of games that are all just coming out constantly all the time through all these different platforms and all the indie games that are being done.
Yeah.
There's just so much noise that to make something that truly inspires and stands out from that, I think is really hard to do now. Where in the past, you were one of a dozen titles that were a premiere on a console that year, and there was more of an opportunity to really stand out. I actually more and more. I don't know. I'm curious if you've experienced the same thing. The last few years, when I go to like PAX or I go to a game conference, I find I spend most of my time in the indie area, because it's where the real innovation is happening and where the games that are being made that are more, um, they're almost more pure games.
Yep.
And I find the vast majority of the big publisher games aren't taking risks. They're a repeat on the same thing over and over and over again. They're playing to tropes. They're more about graphics than they are experience. Uh,
Yes. I think that we're plagued. We may be getting more, but I feel like we're getting less as far on the AAA
yeah,
scale goes. I think that we have a huge problem of trying to develop for everyone, and then it being for no one, rather
yeah,
than developing for that smaller niche, and then it may grow and explode into something if any of the bigger companies would take the risk and do that. And it kind of sucks for me because my favorite form of gameplay is third person RPG combat. Like I love that. I love being able to make builds with characters, and I feel like that's one of the most underrepresented areas of quality games right now. Either like the RPG genres kind of in that vein is kind of in a drought, and now the West is kind of, as far as AAA MMOs go, it's like that the era is almost dead. No, all we have are these Kickstarter games, and the jury's still out on those. We haven't got. I mean, none of them have been completed yet. So
yeah.
we're definitely in a, like, there's pretty much every year there's always something on the horizon. And I think that in the MMO market, like the last 2 years, it's been like, what's happening in older games? What expansion are they adding, rather than
Right.
what new game is there coming? I mean, the East is still pumping out stuff, but most of the time their methods of gameplay, what they enjoy, aren't really what I enjoy in a game. There's not really a lot of character progression and customization in most of those games, so they're usually not my cup of tea.
It's interesting because I think
Mhm.
like there's a little bit of like the king is dead, long live the king situation with MMOs where you can make the argument that the MMO industry is dying or is massively petering out. At the same time, the broad definition of MMOs are thriving more than they ever have,
Right.
but they're living in a broader, expansive genre where, like, Destiny is crazy successful,
Yeah.
and I think really at its core, it is an MMO.
Yeah.
I think rightly so, they did everything to make sure that they didn't market it as that because they were scared about the perception that lives with the MMO market, which I think is a huge challenge right now. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are making games that you could qualify as an MMO, but they will never put that name on it.
Right.
If you tell somebody like, when I say to you, hey, check out this new MMO, like, what are the first couple words that come to mind for you when you think MMO genre?
World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft,
A huge,
right?
huge seamless world with a lot of people in it. Um, Raiding,
Spending lots of time,
spending
huge
lots
time.
of time grinding. Yes, yes, there you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. Like people are willing to say they'll go, I'll play League of Legends 30, 40 hours a week, but they look at an MMO and go, I'm not gonna play your game because it's an MMO and that'll suck my life away. And
But
it's the only genre I can think of that has an inherent, like, the first two reactions to it are actually negative reactions where it's that'll suck my life away and how does it compare to World of Warcraft? And every other genre for the most part, like, there's enough there, you have room to have other discussions around it. Like RTS is kind of in a really tough spot right now as
oh
well.
yeah, oh yeah,
But you look at most of the other genres of games that you can do. The first reaction from someone is, I'm not interested in that because it's going to take my time away. It's tell me more about it, or what is it, or how's it stand out. It's going to be really hard for the MMO genre to move past that. I think you will probably continue to see more single player and multiplayer RPG games as a result,
yeah,
and more online games that are less about the broad, expansive MMO experience and more about just playing online together.
yep.
And like we said earlier, more niche experiences focused at doing one specific thing as a result.
Well, I mean, I think that in vein of in line with like League of Legends and MOBAs, I think they do have a lot of your MMO players playing them,
Mhm.
because they sort of deliver a mini MMO experience in a 30 or 40 minute match. You get it at bite-sized portions of it. You get your character, you kill monsters, you level up, and you PvP, and you fight. You got little raid bosses. You get gear, you get loot, and then it's over. And it's sort of like a fast food version of an MMO. And even though MOBAs aren't my thing, that's what I've spent most of my time playing the past couple of years, because I guess the degradation of the MMO market. And like you said, I see a lot of arguments out there that they're like, MMOs are dead, MMOs are dead, and I do not think that what the MMO experience could be is dead. I think that because we've had so many large companies try to create the same experience over and over again with just tiny differences, better graphics, a few tweaks here and there, because it got so risk averse. I guess the genre is so afraid to take risks. That's why we're seeing a current death right now. Is because people just don't want to play WoW number 10 or 8 or 7 again. They want a different experience.
Yeah, I think also from the game developer perspective too, there's just the cost. Like if you
Yep.
could choose between for the cost of making one MMO, you could split that team up into 4 or 5 teams and make 4 or 5 different games. If you're talking a really large scale MMO,
Yep.
And from a financial standpoint, you're almost always going to be better off taking 4 or 5 chances and having a couple of them turn out great than trying to put all your eggs into one basket. There's very
Right.
few developers, very few publishers that are going to be willing to get behind something really big like that. I think the other thing too is more and more people are realizing that competitive games are evergreen, and the cost of producing them, maintaining them, and monetizing them is so much lower to keep
Oh
players
yeah.
engaged than it is to make a PVE oriented game. I think Path of Exile does a really interesting job of maintaining a almost competitive PVE style
Yep. Yep.
retention model. I think there's something really innovative in there that I hope people pull from and try to do more of. But yeah, I think in a lot of ways you've seen the industry pivot more towards competitive games, and even the esports side of stuff, because it is a means by which you can really grow and keep your user base, without having to spend incredible amounts of money on hundreds of designers and artists and programmers to make this content treadmill to keep up with everybody.
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
constantly blown away by the stats in League of Legends. The
I
number of
know.
people who the number of people play it, but the number of people who only play bot games. Like to them, it is just a PVE game basically,
Wow.
and
Wow.
it's a huge number of people who play League still only play bots, or the vast majority of their time only play against bots with other players.
That's
Uh, and
crazy. Yeah, and you
and
wouldn't
it's
think that. You would not think that as a player, while you're sitting there trying to climb the ladder. You wouldn't think that majority of the population is playing bots
well,
or
it's not majority,
well, I mean
but
a large portion of
yeah.
players. Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely insane to think about. Yeah, and that definitely makes sense as far as you get a competitive game that takes off. You don't you're not plagued with recreating it 2 or 3 years later. You just gotta keep it balanced, keep it updated, and then add some stuff to keep it fresh. And you got game investment that might carry you for 5 to 10 years. I mean, in
Yep.
cases of like StarCraft, look how long that went on. Look how long Counter Strike is going on. It's Dota as well, and now League.
I think it's why you're seeing the mad rush of so many people all pouring into the competitive gaming space right now. Is it makes sense cost wise in the grand scheme of things to build a lot of those games, and the reward is really good. I think certainly the esport bubble is probably one of those things too, where everyone's chasing the esport dream, and probably way too many of them chasing it that should be.
Yeah,
In a lot
yeah,
of ways, also, I think the means of gauging success with that is interesting. Of like, uh, do you gauge success by you are League of Legends or Dota, or do you gauge success by you have a viable competitive community that is monetizing well, that
right,
is lights on, paying for the development costs, and most importantly, like way more important than all the other stuff I just said, they're just having fun and like your game. Like is I think those are in the esports era. It's hard to judge what success looks like just because there are those massive juggernauts to look at,
yeah,
versus just traditional competitive game. Like I look at like Smite, and they're incredibly successful. I don't think they get anything close to the credit they deserve for the way they built grassroots up and built a true like competitive game that's kept this many people playing for this long.
right.
Um, but vast majority of people wouldn't ever tell you that Smite's successful. They'd be like, well, they're not
No,
League of Legends, they're not
they're not
Dota, so
legal.
they're not doing
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
That's ridiculous. They're doing awesome. They're just not the number one, two, or three game in the world. They're not even like number 5, 6, 7 competitive wise. But that's okay. You can have a totally successful business like that. Um, I hope over time there's more embracing that it's okay to have competitive games of different sizes and for different markets, much the
yep.
way that it's okay to have a niche game of any type that people really enjoy as long as it justifies the cost.
Right, right, and and in that genre itself, the MOBA genre, I think we could see a lot there, but I feel like we're seeing a lot of people fall into the pitfall of of what a lot of developers did with WoW, and it's like, okay, look at WoW, now we gotta do that, we have to do that, and whereas the genre doesn't have to be just lanes and minions,
Yep.
it can progress to something much greater, and I mean, like I said, it's kind of like MOBAs are a little mini slice of MMOs. I mean, there's definitely something that can be played on in that aspect as well. I think uh, going towards more some of those elements. I just what I would really love to see is a competitive game with really solid like third person RPG combat that's also spectator friendly. Something that's built that's readable. It's not a bunch of mess flying all over the screen. That's definitely something hard to do, but that would be something that I would really enjoy to see.
Do you know anyone who's making that game?
No.
How
No, no, no.
about
Um,
so it has elements of this of RPG elements. It's not leveling up, and it's certainly not fantasy, but like some of the survival games kind of fall into that category of like
my,
H1Z1 or Battlegrounds, where you drop in, you gather all your gear, which is effectively kind of your leveling up
yeah,
RPG experience. It's third person, you fight till the end. Do those register for you? Is that like, does that scratch a
for
little bit of the itch, or
for
is that
me
too?
for me personally, no, because I'm like what really draws me to a game personally is being able to take a character and finding interesting abilities and synergies between those that I can then mold and create
Hmm.
and so that's something that I feel is largely missing in gaming at this moment.
Cool,
So yeah.
nice. So much to make that
Yeah,
game.
yeah. And so are you ready for a little bit of fun?
I am, yes. Throw it at me.
Especially with hearing about the respect you have for people developing MMOs now, the agony that goes along with them. I think these will be some interesting questions. I'm gonna put you through a little gauntlet or a trial. There's
Oh
no.
man,
I'm gonna pull out the stopwatch, and you're gonna be no. There's gonna be no
I was
timing.
not warned this was part of the interview. I'm scared.
So here we go. You're completely in charge of a new studio. You're tasked with creating a AAA MMORPG or a co-RPG at the bare minimum. You have a sub $10 million budget, and you have a 1.5 year time window to get this product into a beta state. How do you operate differently than most studios, and what things do you keep the same?
Oh my God, does that studio exist, or are you building it? So
What was that? You cut out right there.
does the studio already exist that you're trying to do this in, or are you building the studio from scratch from day one too?
I'm building it right here. No,
Okay.
that's my dream studio. Is
Holy shit.
the one that could pull this off.
Mm, I I I probably uh my first answer is don't do it.
Do it.
That sounds
Don't
like
do it.
disaster waiting to happen. Like don't even try. A year and a half to do all of that. Like man,
So what?
find
Okay,
find a studio that already exists that has technology that's willing to partner with you
okay.
and pay them half of your $10 million to spend the year and a half working with you on it and promise them a huge chunk of the revenue so that you have a whole bunch of people to help you build it. Yeah, I don't know, man. That sounds like building an MMO in that amount of time in a new studio. That just sounds impossible.
Okay. So do you think if it was Colin, you have to do this or death? Would,
Shoot, that changes things.
would you try to get the
I run as
you'd
fast as
run
I can.
would you try to get the market in smaller pieces or
Yeah,
would
I think you pick something small. You go with an engine that's already out there that works.
yeah
That you know you're gonna have to give up a chunk of your revenue, but you're focused on, or not like a lumberyard where you don't have to give up a chunk of your revenue is pretty sweet too. But
okay
you get one of the existing engines and you use that as fast as humanly possible, so that you don't have to build an engine from scratch. I think you probably use something like a game lift where you get your server network infrastructure mostly built with limited work required from your end, so you don't
right
need to build an entire network infrastructure. I think you go grab a couple of the best engineers that you could possibly find, and you overpay them to compensate for the fact that you can't afford to have a big team, and you hope that you get a couple of them who are just absolutely phenomenal, amazing, and that they can do everything. You prepare yourself for not sleeping for a year and a half because you're not going to. You ideally find an apartment to work out of or somebody's home that you can do it so you don't have to pay rent,
Yep.
and do it as part of a living expense as opposed to operating as like a out of a business somewhere. Man, if you have people's desks and closets, if that's what it takes, that's what you have to do. Uh, you pick an idea that is simple uh, and easy to conceptualize, simple to build and prototype quickly so that you can iterate on it really fast because you don't have time to spend a year building it to find out if it works. You need to build something really quick and start iterating over and over again to get to find the fun. Because
Yep.
ultimately, until you find what's fun about your game, nothing else matters. Like getting to that core, then you build everything on top of that. So you find the fun as fast as you possibly can. You make it simple. Ideally, you make it something that you put the power in the player's hands to create with as much as possible so that you don't need a team that does a lot of the work. You instead do something where the players can really actively create and make the game within the tools that you've given them. I think that's probably where I would start.
So what
You
areas would you focus your budget on? Like what areas would you try to get by with less on, and what areas would you try to, I guess, throw more of the money in?
with that budget, you don't want high. You're not going to be able to have high fidelity art. You want really like get one really great art director who can also make art and animate and do everything. And maybe even they can program a little bit.
Yeah,
And that's it. That's your art team, and maybe you do some outsourcing on top of that. I think that's the first thing you lose is your game is not going to be.
the
Um,
most beautiful game.
yeah, it's certainly not going to be Overwatch. Like you're not
Yeah.
super high fidelity, incredible characters. You can make beautiful. It just has to be in really creative ways. I look at like, yeah, I guess beauty in a different way. You can make a journey or what is it like Black Swan? Is that it? I can't remember what the game's called, but it was like the whole game was black and you painted things white as you played through it. Like you can do some really innovative,
Yeah.
beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
Um, it just you have to be really creative in how you do it. Yeah, I think the bulk of your money needs to go into your engineering team. I would certainly say you have one designer and that's it.
Okay.
And that person is the creative director and the designer and the vision holder, and everyone else on the team also has to be designers too because they have to help design the game.
Yeah.
Um, you're selling it on a existing platform. There's no way in the world you're doing anything other than that. You're definitely not selling box copies of your game. You're not
No,
gonna build
no,
a launcher to
no.
distribute it. You definitely need to partner with a platform. Um, man, that's stuff to start with. I don't know. I've honestly I've never had the opportunity to do something like that. So I would probably need to spend like 2 months just sitting thinking about how in the world all of that would work.
Yeah.
I would also recommend you ask a bunch. I would, if I was the studio head of that, I would go talk to as many people as I possibly could who have done that before. Go find the guys who made FTL and sit down with them and pick their brain for a week and learn everything they did, everything they would do differently, what worked, what
Okay.
didn't work, and go through Darkest Dungeon, same thing. Go find those guys. Like take every really great indie title that was built with a small team in the last 5 years, in particular all the ones that popped up on Steam, um, and just grill them on everything you possibly can learn about what they've done because you're going to learn more from that than you ever could from somebody like me. Like to be honest, my perspective is in a lot of ways the total opposite. It's how do you manage big teams with big budgets or deal with
Yeah.
medium-sized studios that grow into big studios. I think any advice I would give on the tiny studio space probably either is really bad advice or take it with a huge grain of salt because those people know infinitely better than I have. I think also get people who failed, who tried doing that and failed. It's interesting. You learn so much from failing that you can get a lot of lessons out of that too. I mean, I think the things that I've learned the most out of my career were the moments that I failed rather than I
Right.
succeeded.
Right.
Uh, and yeah, I think definitely getting some of those people that didn't ship a great game, but you could see the nuggets in there that it could have been, or you could see what they were going for. Find out what happened in there too.
Okay.
That would be a big one, and I would do all of that before you ever start the company.
Yep. Yep. And so even though your experience is more on a large scale, if you were tossed into this environment, how what would you do different as far as running your team and how milestones are treated versus what you would do on a normal project?
I think I would actually run them exactly the same, except I would expect that I think we would all have to know that we're going to be working insane hours.
Right.
But the sprints would be, you'd have a week or 2 week sprints, just like most games. The difference
Yeah.
is your 1 week sprint is 7 days made up of 70 hours of work to make the game. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that stuff is pretty tried and true, which is organize people in a way that everyone knows what they're working on, that everyone talks constantly, that they all feel like they have creative input in the game and they have a chance to give feedback. That there's a really clear vision of what the game should be. I can't overstate that enough. Like,
Yeah.
if there's one thing I've learned of in particular, the last like 5 years of my career is the difference between one person who is the clear vision holder, capable of communicating that to everyone, is paramount to the success of a team. And if that vision is not clearly stated over and over and over again, and everyone knows exactly what game they're making, that's where the wheels start to come off. And if you have a couple people on your team who are vision holders, or 2 or 3 or 4, and all of them are disagreeing or have different opinions about where it should go, as opposed to just one clear owner that everyone knows, it's huge trouble.
It's like you need someone that transcends all that, so that with the clear vision, so that there's not inner turmoil or confusion.
Yep. And they need to be really good at communicating it and listening to everyone and being able to respect every person on the team. Somebody could give you feedback 99 times that's terrible, and the 100th time they give you feedback, it's the most genius thing you've ever heard. And so being able to stop and listen always to that feedback, parse it, look for where the gold nuggets are within feedback that are amazing ideas, and be able to act on them. And then when people give you ideas that you don't want to use, being able to tell them, this is why this idea won't work for our game. It could be an amazing idea. It could be like, this is one of the greatest ideas I've ever heard, but it's not for the game that we're making, because this is the game we're making, and it's just this.
Right.
Do not ever go outside this box for what this game is, and let's write that other idea down on an idea board for a game we'll make someday in the future. I think that's super important. I think empowering the team to feel like they own the ultimate success of the game, even though they may not own the final creative vision. Day to day, each of them feels like they own a part of what the success will be, is huge. Get customer feedback as early as humanly possible and constantly. If you're running this theoretical studio, find people in your city who are willing to play the game and get them over to play it all the time and give you feedback on it. You said it earlier, and you could not be more right. Most game teams wait to get feedback until it's too late, and by the time they get feedback, they're so far in that they can't change fundamental systems or core components of their game, and all they can do is little tweaks. I think this is a lesson I think that I'm hopefully applying to the stuff that we do here, is getting that customer feedback as early as humanly possible and constantly is one of the ways you really understand, hey, this is what people think about our game. They like it, they don't like it. They're inspired by this, they're not inspired by this. And they're not always going to be right, and even the things they ask you to do sometimes might be terrible ideas, but the thing that they're asking for is telling you there's something missing in your game. That's huge. Like you can get caught in the weeds if you're not getting that outside perspective all the time.
Right. That makes sense.
Hey, Ward, in about 1 minute, I gotta run to another meeting, man. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. Let's see. What do I want to end this off? Where do we go with this? So let's just go to this. When it's all said and done, what mark on the industry do you want to leave behind that you would be content with? Like, is it certain ideas that you might have inside that you want to bring to life, or is it just the amount of quality you put out and how you interact with people within your development community?
Huh. I'd like to think that the most important, I think the thing I care about the most is that the people I work with genuinely are having fun making the game that they're working on, and when it ships, they're proud of it, and that we have a environment that every single person working together genuinely loves the game, feels like they can have feedback on it, and feels like they were a part of making it something really special. And if people can look back on what I've done and say, hey, Colin was a guy who helped make the workplace 1% more fun for everyone who worked there, and the game's a little bit, and allowed all of us to truly succeed. Like he he let great people do their stuff and got out of their way. I'd be really proud of that. And as long as I do that, I think everything else I'd love to see happen would just naturally follow that.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, but I think that's the most important one. Is like honestly, great games are made with a whole hell of a lot of heart, and it's a whole team of people who all love working together and believe in a product more than anything else. And I think that's ultimately like that is the difference between a great game and a bad game. Is the people
Okay.
who are working on it love each other and love working on it and love the product so much.
Right.
And I'd like to think people would say I helped make teams that together loved working together and loved building things. That'd be pretty awesome. I'd be stoked if even a few people said that.
Okay. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, that's gonna wrap up the show. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was great.